Hey y'all, happy Tuesday. I just put up a new post about the topic of consent and kind of how to talk with your children about that idea. So when I talk to kids about consent, I usually talk about this idea of safety. So we usually have like a classroom, sorry, there was a fly. Like a classroom commitment, or maybe you have like family commitments or family rules around safety. And so this would kind of fall under that safety rule. And so consent, and I think when you're talking to young children, finding a way to define complicated topics in a developmentally appropriate way is really important. And so we say consent means that nobody can touch your body without your permission, and nobody can make you feel unsafe without your permission. So I think especially right now with the holidays coming up and a lot of like family gatherings, there's often a lot of instances of like forced affection. So times when you might hear parents, or you might say, give your uncle a hug, or give your grandma a kiss, or something like that. And I think when we start to talk with our children about consent, the idea is that we really want to empower them to be the boss of their own body and learn how to set boundaries and make choices for themselves to keep themselves safe, and to understand that they are really the ones that are in control of their bodies and their safety, and setting those boundaries for what's okay and what's not. Because then, down the road, that really leads to a bigger conversation, but it really starts when they're really young. So I think some alternatives to forced affection can be like, instead of saying, give your uncle a hug, you could say, how would you like to greet your uncle? Or how would you like to say goodbye to your uncle? And then while your child is learning about what those options are, you might say, do you want to wave? Do you want to give them a high five? Would you like to give them a hug? But ultimately, it's their choice of how they want to physically interact with that other person. And this really sends the message that this child is in charge of their body, so that when they find themselves in tricky situations where they need to set boundaries about physical contact and feeling unsafe, they have skills and practice of knowing how to do that. In the years that I've been teaching and talking about consent in my classroom, I've often had parents who felt uneasy because the word consent is often used in relation to sexual activity. But I think that this conversation starts so far before sex is even in the picture for children. And it's really more about empowering children to choose relationships that make them feel safe, and be able to set boundaries when a friend or a family member or a stranger or anyone does something that isn't making them feel safe. So it's really about empowerment, and it's really about having autonomy over their body. I think the biggest takeaway from having conversations about consent is really that we adults aren't always going to be there to keep children safe, especially when they enter, early adolescence and the teenage years. We want them to have the foundational skills to be able to have these kinds of conversations with friends and people also who they really want affection from. They still need to learn the skills to be able to set boundaries, so that it doesn't become like people-pleasing behavior. It's something where it's like, I know my body and I know what makes my body feel safe, and this isn't making my body feel safe, so I'm going to set a boundary around it. So it's really about giving kids that autonomy and giving them kind of real-time practice to set boundaries to keep themselves safe. So conversations about consent can really start as soon as babies are moving on their own. And when babies start to respond to your voice and the way that you're talking to them, you can start to say things like, is it okay if I pick you up? And I think that is a really good one for teaching consent to older siblings of babies. And then it kind of sets that boundary for the baby too, where like if an older sister kind of wants to carry the baby around all the time, because I think we love to do that, that's a place where you can say, you know, did you ask your sister if she wants to be carried? Did you ask your sister if you could pick her up? Try that now. Ask her, say, sister, can I carry you? Can I pick you up? And this is really starting that conversation about consent. And you can use the word and say, did you get consent from your sister to carry her around? And then I think the hardest part of this work is really, especially during the holidays, is really for you as the adult being able to hold the boundaries with family members. So when your grandma or your mom says, come give me a kiss, something that you might need to say is, can you ask them if they would like to give you a kiss? And so then that kind of can become a tricky situation. And I think, really being able to progress into a culture where we have people who are able to make consensual decisions and be able to create safe relationships, we have to have these hard conversations with the people that we love, including our parents, our family members, and all of those people who are interacting with the child, so that children can begin to understand that sometimes people might not know what consent is or what it looks like. And so that's why they need to be able to set that boundary and then be able to say, you're not making me feel safe. And that's why I'm asking you to ask me first the next time you want to give me a hug or give me a kiss. So just a couple more tips of how to start to implement this idea of consent in your family. Could be around things like when your child comes home and says something like, so-and-so pushed me on the playground, then just to ask them and say, did you give that person permission to push you? And when the child says no, because they probably didn't, you can teach them something that I like to teach kids is like with their hands to say, stop, I don't like that. I want you to ask me if you can touch my body or something like that. And often kids will start to use the word in conversation and say, you didn't get consent to push me down the slide, and things like that. And I think when I talk about it in my classroom, kind of all of the kids have an understanding about what that word means. And so they start to use it with each other in real time so that they can build meaning about what it means for them and what it looks like to set boundaries with friends. Another kind of idea might be around, maybe you celebrate Christmas and you want to take pictures with Santa. And I think the expectation is that, children will sit on Santa's lap, but Santa's kind of a stranger, and, those small Santas can be kind of scary. And I've seen a lot of people who post kind of like these scream crying pictures of their babies on Santa's lap. And one way that might be prevented is by giving your child an option of like, would you like to take a picture with Santa this year? Where would you like to be in the picture? Maybe your child wants to sit on Santa's lap. Maybe they would prefer to stand next to Santa or somewhere else that's, in the frame of the picture, instead of feeling fearful and being forced to sit on a stranger's lap when they're scared. That's not really sending the same message that they have control over their body and their safety. So if you are talking about consent in your family or you do this in a different way, I would love to hear about it. So send me a message, comment on the post I just did about consent. I would love to hear more ideas so that I can share them kind of for other parents and educators who are looking for different strategies and ideas about how to talk to kids about consent. So there's so much more to say on this topic, so I might post another video or post. So stay tuned and have a great day.